You don't need to be the smartest in the room. You don't need power or charm. What you need is the ability to understand people and make them feel understood. That's how you make anyone your best friend. It's not manipulation, it's mastery. The greatest influence is born from genuine interest and sincere appreciation. And in this video, I'll teach you the principles to build lasting bonds that elevate every area of your life. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind, and tell us, where are you watching from? Let me tell you something that might surprise you. Every great connection in your life started with a choice. Not chance. Choice. I've spent decades teaching people the art of human relations, and here's what I've discovered. The people who master relationships aren't born with some magical gift. They simply understand a fundamental truth that most miss. Connection is deliberate. Think about the last time you walked into a room full of strangers. What was your first instinct? If you're like most people, you probably felt that familiar tug of anxiety, that voice telling you to retreat to a quiet corner or bury yourself in your phone. But here's what separates the masters of connection from everyone else. They make a conscious decision to engage. You see, influence isn't about being the loudest voice in the room or having the most impressive credentials. It's about making a fundamental shift in how you approach every human interaction. When I first started teaching these principles, I noticed something fascinating. The most successful people weren't necessarily the most talented or educated. They were the ones who understood that every interaction was an opportunity to build something meaningful. Let me share a story that illustrates this perfectly. Years ago, I met a salesman named Tom, who was struggling to make connections with his clients. He had all the technical knowledge, all the right products, but something was missing. When I asked him about his approach, he said something revealing. I just hope they like me. Hope, my friends, is not a strategy. I taught Tom to shift his mindset. Instead of hoping for connection, he needed to choose it. Before every meeting, he started asking himself 3 questions. What can I learn from this person? How can I make them feel valued? What genuine common ground can we find? The results were transformative. Within 6 months, he hadn't just improved his sales, he'd built a network of loyal clients who saw him as a trusted advisor. This is the power of intentional connection. When you understand that every relationship is built through conscious choice, you stop leaving your interactions to chance. You begin to see every conversation, every meeting, every casual exchange as an opportunity to lay the foundation for something greater. But here's the critical part. This isn't about manipulation or tactical advantage. It's about understanding that genuine connection is the most powerful force in human relations. When you choose to connect with sincerity and purpose, you tap into something fundamental to human nature. Our deep need to be understood and valued. Think of it this way. Every person you meet today is carrying their own stories, their own struggles, their own aspirations. They're not just potential clients, colleagues, or acquaintances. They're human beings seeking connection, just like you. When you make the conscious choice to engage with them on this level, you transform ordinary interactions into opportunities for meaningful connection. This is why I say connection is a choice. It's about deciding in every moment to be fully present, to listen with intention, to seek understanding before being understood. These aren't just nice ideas. They're practical tools that will transform how you relate to every person you meet. Remember, the quality of your life is directly proportional to the quality of your relationships. And the quality of your relationships? That's determined by the choices you make in every interaction, every single day. There's a hunger that lives in every human heart. It's not for food or wealth or even success. It's the hunger to feel important, to feel significant, to know that our existence matters. I learned this lesson early in my career, and it changed everything I understood about human nature. Let me share something profound with you. The deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated, not just liked, appreciated. Think about it. Why do people spend fortunes on luxury cars? Why do they chase titles and positions? Why do they post their achievements on social media? It all comes back to this fundamental need to feel important. Charles Schwab, one of the first people to earn $1 million in salary in corporate America, once told me his secret to success. He said, "I consider my ability to arouse enthusiasm among my people the greatest asset I possess, and the way to develop the best that is in a person is by appreciation and encouragement." But here's where most people get it wrong. They think making others feel important means constant praise or artificial flattery. Nothing could be further from the truth. People can smell insincerity from a mile away. The art lies in finding what is genuinely worthy of appreciation in each person you meet. Let me give you a real example. There was a janitor I used to see every morning in an office building where I taught. Most people walked past him without a second glance. But I noticed something. He kept those floors spotless, took pride in his work. One day I stopped and told him how I'd noticed how the marble floors always gleamed under his care, how it made everyone's day better to walk into such a well-maintained building. The way his face lit up, you would have thought I'd handed him $1,000. From that day forward, our brief morning conversations became a highlight of both our days. He shared his techniques for keeping the floors so pristine, his philosophy about taking pride in your work, no matter what that work might be. This man wasn't just a janitor. He was an artist in his own right, and he just needed someone to notice. This is the power of making others feel important. It's not about grand gestures or empty compliments. It's about recognizing the inherent dignity and value in every person you meet. It's about understanding that everyone, from the CEO to the cleaning staff, has a deep need to feel that their contributions matter. But here's the crucial part. This isn't just about being nice. It's about understanding a fundamental truth of human psychology. When you make others feel important, genuinely important, you tap into the most powerful force in human relations. People will move mountains for those who make them feel valued. Think about the last time someone made you feel truly important. Not just complimented, but genuinely valued. Remember how that felt? That's the gift you have the power to give others every single day. This principle transforms every interaction. In business, it turns customers into loyal advocates. In leadership, it turns employees into inspired partners. In personal relationships, it turns acquaintances into lifelong friends. The beautiful paradox is this: the more you focus on making others feel important, the more important you become in their lives. Not because you sought importance for yourself, but because you gave it freely to others. So let me challenge you. In your next interaction, focus entirely on making the other person feel important, not through flattery, but through genuine appreciation of their qualities, their efforts, their humanity. Watch what happens. You'll see firsthand why this principle has the power to transform every relationship in your life. You know what's remarkable about Theodore Roosevelt? It wasn't his presidency or his achievements that made him truly extraordinary. It was his genuine interest in every person he met. From ambassadors to bootblacks, he had this incredible ability to make each person feel like the most fascinating individual he'd ever encountered. Let me tell you something profound. You can't fake interest. People can sense insincerity like sharks sense blood in water. The secret to becoming unforgettable isn't about pretending to care. It's about developing genuine curiosity about the human beings around you. I once knew a man who could walk into any room and within minutes have strangers telling him their life stories. His secret: he was genuinely fascinated by people. He once told me, "Dale, everyone has something to teach me. I just have to find out what it is." This isn't about being extroverted or charismatic. It's about understanding a fundamental truth. Every person you meet is a universe of experiences, knowledge, and insights waiting to be discovered. The moment you truly grasp this, something magical happens. You stop trying to be interesting and start being interested. Let me share a personal story that transformed my understanding of this principle. Years ago, I met a taxi driver in New York. Instead of burying myself in my thoughts during the ride, I asked him about his life. Turns out he was a former professor of literature from Iran who had to flee his country. For the next hour, he gave me the most fascinating lecture on Persian poetry I'd ever heard. That ride changed how I saw every interaction. Every person has a story that could amaze you if only you take the time to discover it. But here's where most people go wrong. They think being interested means asking a lot of questions. Questions alone aren't enough. True interest means listening with your whole being. It means remembering details. It means following up. When someone tells you their child has a big game coming up, genuine interest means asking about the outcome. The next time you see them, I've watched countless people transform their lives by mastering this principle. There was a young executive who was struggling to connect with her team. She was competent, hardworking, but something was missing. I advised her to spend 15 minutes each day learning something new about one team member, not work-related, but personal. Within months, her team's productivity soared. Why? Because they felt seen, heard, understood. Here's a powerful exercise I want you to try. In your next conversation, make it your mission to discover 3 interesting things about the person you're talking to. Not surface details, but real insights. What drives them? What are they passionate about? What challenges have they overcome? The beauty of genuine interest is that it creates a virtuous cycle. The more interested you become in others, the more interesting they find you. Not because you're trying to be interesting, but because genuine curiosity is magnetic. It draws people to you naturally. Remember this: boredom is a choice. Every person you meet today has something valuable to teach you. They have experiences you've never had, perspectives you've never considered, wisdom you've never encountered. When you approach each interaction with this mindset, something remarkable happens. You don't just build connections. You build understanding, and in a world where everyone is fighting for attention, being genuinely interested in others is your superpower. It's the difference between having acquaintances and having allies, between making contacts and making friends, between building a network and building a community. So, let me challenge you. For the next week, approach every conversation with genuine curiosity. Forget about making an impression. Instead, make it your mission to learn something fascinating about every person you meet. Watch how this simple shift transforms your relationships. There's a language that needs no translation, a currency accepted in every country, a key that opens doors before you even reach for the handle. It's your smile, but not just any smile. I'm talking about the genuine smile that comes from deep within and lights up your entire face. Let me tell you something powerful. Your smile is the messenger of your goodwill. It's the single most important signal you can send to another human being. In my years of teaching human relations, I've watched rooms transform with a single sincere smile. I've seen tense negotiations dissolve into friendly agreements. I've witnessed strangers become friends, all because someone had the wisdom to smile first. But here's what most people don't understand. A genuine smile isn't just about turning up the corners of your mouth. It's about projecting warmth from your heart through your eyes. The Japanese have a beautiful phrase for this. They call it smiling with your eyes. They understand that a true smile involves your entire being. I once knew a bank president in New York who transformed his entire institution with this principle. His bank was struggling, losing customers to bigger competitors, but he had one asset that no other bank could match. He taught every employee the power of a genuine smile. We can't compete with the big banks in terms of resources, he told me, but we can make every customer feel genuinely welcome. Within a year, his bank's customer satisfaction scores soared and deposits increased dramatically. Here's a fascinating truth. When you smile, you don't just affect others. You change your own biochemistry. Scientists have discovered that the mere act of smiling triggers the release of dopamine, endorphins, and serotonin in your brain. These are the same chemicals that make you feel good when you win a prize or accomplish a goal. In other words, your smile isn't just a response to happiness, it's a creator of happiness. But let me be clear, I'm not talking about plastering a fake smile on your face. People can spot a phony smile from a mile away. I'm talking about developing the habit of genuine cheerfulness, of finding reasons to smile, of choosing to approach life with warmth and optimism. Here's a powerful experiment I want you to try. Tomorrow morning, before you interact with anyone, take a moment to smile. Not because anything particularly good has happened, but because you've decided to start your day with positive energy. Then, maintain that smile as you go about your morning routine. Notice how differently people respond to you. I remember a woman who took this challenge. She was going through a difficult divorce and felt she had nothing to smile about. But she committed to smiling at every person she met for 1 week. The results amazed her. Not only did people respond more positively to her, but she found herself feeling genuinely happier. It was like I was tricking my brain into feeling better, she told me, and eventually I wasn't tricking it anymore. I was actually feeling better. Think about the last time someone gave you a genuine smile. Remember how it made you feel? That's the gift you have the power to give others every single day. It costs nothing, but its value is immeasurable. Here's another powerful aspect of smiling. It's contagious. When you smile at someone, you trigger what psychologists call mirror neurons in their brain. These neurons create an instinct to smile back. In other words, your smile has the power to create a chain reaction of positivity. So let me challenge you. Make your smile your signature. Let it be the first thing people notice about you and the last thing they remember. Not a plastered-on grin, but a genuine expression of warmth and goodwill. Watch how this simple act transforms your interactions, your relationships, and ultimately your life. Remember, a smile is the shortest distance between two people. Use it wisely, use it often, and watch how it opens doors you never knew existed. Remember this, a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. It's not just a word, it's their identity, their personality, their entire being, wrapped up in a few syllables. And when you remember and use someone's name, you're doing more than recalling a word, you're acknowledging their unique existence in this world. I once watched a corporate executive transform his entire relationship with his staff through this one principle. He made it his mission to learn and use the name of every employee in his building, from the senior managers to the maintenance staff. The impact was extraordinary. Productivity increased, turnover decreased, and employee satisfaction soared. Why? Because people felt seen, recognized, important. But here's what most people say, I'm terrible with names. Let me tell you something powerful. That's not a fact. It's a story you tell yourself. And like any story, it can be rewritten. The truth is, remembering names isn't a talent you're born with. It's a skill you can develop. Let me share with you the system I've taught to thousands of people who claimed they could never remember names. It's based on 3 simple principles: impression, repetition, and association. First, impression. When you meet someone, make a conscious effort to hear their name clearly. If you didn't catch it perfectly, ask them to repeat it. Most people are flattered when you show such interest in getting their name right. If it's an unusual name, ask about its origin or spelling. This creates a stronger initial impression. I once met a gentleman named Brzezinski at a conference. Instead of glossing over his complex name, I asked him about its Polish origins. He spent 5 minutes telling me about his family's history, and I never forgot his name after that conversation. Why? Because I created a story around it. Second, repetition. Use their name naturally in conversation, not every other sentence, but enough to cement it in your mind. So, Michael, what brought you to this field? That's fascinating, Michael. Tell me more about that. When you say goodbye, use their name one final time. It was great meeting you, Michael. Third, association. Connect the name to something memorable. If you meet a Linda who has bright blue eyes, you might think Linda with the luminous eyes. If Robert is a lawyer, you might think Robert the legal eagle. These associations might seem silly, but they work because they create a memorable connection in your mind. Here's a powerful technique I learned from a memory expert. The moment you hear someone's name, visualize it written across their forehead in bright letters. This visual anchor helps cement the name in your memory. But here's the crucial part. You have to care about remembering names. You have to make it a priority. The biggest reason people forget names isn't lack of memory, it's lack of attention. They're too focused on what they're going to say next, or they're scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. Let me share a story that illustrates this perfectly. There was a politician I knew who had an extraordinary ability to remember names. His secret? The moment he met someone, he would tell himself, "This person's name is important. This person is important." This simple mental shift made all the difference. Think about how you feel when someone you've met briefly remembers your name in a subsequent meeting. There's a warmth, a connection that instantly forms. That's the power you have with every name. You remember, here's a challenge for you. In the next 24 hours, make it your mission to remember the name of every person you meet. Write them down if you need to. Create associations. Use their names in conversation. Then, the next time you see these people, watch their faces light up when you greet them by name. Remember, forgetting a name is forgetting an opportunity. Every name you remember is a bridge to a potential relationship, a possible collaboration, a future friendship. In a world where people feel increasingly invisible, remembering someone's name is one of the most powerful ways to make them feel seen. In all my years of teaching human relations, I've discovered this profound truth. Being a good listener is rarer than diamonds and twice as valuable. Most people don't listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. And therein lies the great mistake that keeps them from truly connecting with others. Let me tell you about a man I once knew, a highly successful executive who struggled in his personal relationships. He came to me frustrated, saying, "Dale, I can't seem to maintain close friendships. People don't open up to me." When I observed him in conversation, the problem became clear. He was always waiting for his turn to speak, always ready with a story that would top whatever the other person was saying. I taught him what I'm about to teach you, the art of being. The listener everyone craves. First, understand this fundamental truth. Listening isn't passive. It's one of the most active things you can do. When you truly listen to someone, you're not just hearing words. You're receiving their thoughts, feelings, and unspoken messages. You're giving them the rarest gift in our distracted world, your complete attention. Here's how to master this art. Start with your body language. Face the person squarely. Maintain comfortable eye contact. Lean slightly forward. These physical signals say, "I'm fully present with you." I once watched a mediator resolve a bitter dispute between two business partners simply by demonstrating this kind of focused attention. Neither party had felt truly heard until that moment. Next, eliminate distractions. Put your phone away, not just on silent, but completely out of sight. In our digital age, this simple act has become a powerful statement of respect. When you do this, you're saying, "Right now, nothing is more important than what you have to say." Learn to use silence effectively. Most people are uncomfortable with silence in conversation. They rush to fill it. But master listeners understand that silence is often when the most important things are said. After someone finishes speaking, wait a few seconds before responding. You'll be amazed at how often they'll continue with something even more meaningful. Practice what I call reflective listening. This means occasionally summarizing what the other person has said, not just their words, but the feelings behind them. "So what I'm hearing is," or "it sounds like this was really important to you." These phrases show you're not just hearing, you're understanding. I remember teaching this technique to a father who was struggling to connect with his teenage daughter. He was always ready with advice, always quick to solve her problems. I suggested he try just listening, really listening. without offering solutions. The change in their relationship was remarkable. For the first time, he told me, my daughter is coming to me with the big stuff, not just the small talk. Here's something powerful. When you become a great listener, you become unforgettable. Why? Because in a world where everyone is competing to be heard, someone who truly listens stands out like a lighthouse on a dark shore. But there's a catch. You can't fake this. You can't pretend to listen while your mind wanders to your next meeting or what you're having for dinner. People can sense when you're not fully present. The key is to develop genuine curiosity about what others are saying. Try this experiment. In your next conversation, make it your goal to learn 3 new things about the person you're talking with. Not surface details, but real insights. This goal will naturally make you a better listener because you're focused on discovery rather than response. Remember, listening is not about keeping quiet until it's your turn to speak. It's about creating a safe space where others feel heard and understood. When you master this, you'll notice something remarkable. People will seek you out. They'll trust you with their thoughts, their dreams, their concerns. You'll become their confidant, their advisor, their friend. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more you listen, the more interesting you become to others. Not because you're trying to be interesting, but because you're genuinely interested in them. So, let me challenge you. In your next 3 conversations, focus entirely on listening. Don't think about what you're going to say next. Don't share your similar experience. Just listen with your full attention, your complete presence, your whole heart. Watch how this changes the quality of your interactions. Let me share a secret that the world's most influential people understand. The key to connecting with others isn't talking about what interests you. It's talking about what interests them. This simple shift in perspective can transform every conversation, every relationship, every opportunity in your life. I once knew a man who was struggling to make sales in the automotive industry. His product knowledge was exceptional, his prices competitive, but something wasn't clicking with customers. When he came to me for advice, I asked him to record his typical sales presentation. The problem became immediately clear. He spent 90% of his time talking about engine specifications and technical features, but almost no time discussing what actually mattered to his customers, how the car would improve their daily lives. Here's what I taught him. Before you speak about your product, your idea, or yourself, ask yourself this crucial question. Why should they care? Not, why do you care? Why should they care? This principle transformed his approach. Instead of leading with horsepower statistics, he started asking customers about their daily commute, their family needs, their weekend activities. He learned to translate technical features into personal benefits. A powerful engine became easier merging onto highways during your morning commute. Advanced safety features became peace of mind when driving your children to school. His sales doubled within 3 months. Why? Because he learned to speak in terms of his customers' interests. But this principle goes far beyond sales. It's about understanding a fundamental truth of human nature. People are most interested in themselves. This isn't selfishness, it's human nature. The wise person understands this and uses it not to manipulate, but to create genuine connections. Let me give you a powerful example. There was a young engineer who was struggling to get management to approve her innovative project ideas. Her presentations were technically brilliant, but failed to gain traction. I advised her to research the specific challenges each executive was facing in their department. She then reframed her presentations to show how her innovations would help solve their particular problems. The result? Her next project was approved unanimously. She hadn't changed her ideas. She had simply learned to present them in terms of her audience's interests. Here's how you can master this principle. First, become a student of other people's interests. Pay attention to what lights them up in conversation. What do they spend their free time doing? What problems keep them awake at night? What goals drive them forward? This information is gold, but only if you genuinely care about understanding it. I remember a CEO who transformed his company's culture with this approach. Instead of starting meetings with business updates, he began by asking each team member about their current projects and challenges. He took notes, asked follow-up questions, and most importantly, remembered these details for future conversations. Within months, employee engagement soared. Why? Because people felt their interests mattered to their leader. Here's a powerful technique. Before any important conversation or meeting, take 5 minutes to write down what you know about the other person's interests, challenges, and goals. Then frame your message in terms of these factors. This simple practice can dramatically improve your ability to connect and influence. But remember, this isn't about manipulation. It's about genuine understanding and alignment. When you truly understand what matters to others, you can create win-win situations that benefit everyone. Think about the last time someone showed genuine interest in your passions. Remember how that made you feel? That's the gift you can give to others. When you speak in terms of their interests, you're not just making conversation. You're creating connection. Here's a challenge for you. In your next 3 conversations, make a conscious effort to steer the discussion toward the other person's interests. Ask questions about their passions. Show genuine curiosity about their challenges. Connect your ideas to their goals. The beauty of this principle is that it creates a virtuous cycle. When you show genuine interest in others' interests, they naturally become more interested in you. Not because you've tried to impress them, but because you've shown them you care about what matters to them. Remember, your knowledge, your ideas, your products, they only matter to others when you can show how they connect to what already matters in their lives. Master this principle, and you'll never struggle to hold someone's attention again. There is a fundamental difference between appreciation and flattery. One is sincere, the other insincere. One comes from the heart, the other from the teeth. One is unselfish, the other selfish. And people can tell the difference instantly. Let me tell you a story that illustrates this perfectly. Years ago, I knew 2 managers at the same company. Both believed in the power of positive reinforcement, but their approaches couldn't have been more different. The first would walk around the office saying things like, "Great job," to everyone, regardless of their performance. The second took the time to notice specific contributions and acknowledge them personally. Can you guess which manager had better results? The second manager's team was more productive, more loyal, and had lower turnover. Why? Because genuine appreciation, when given specifically and sincerely, has the power to transform both the giver and the receiver. Here's what most people don't understand about appreciation. It's not about making people feel good. It's about recognizing genuine worth. When you truly appreciate someone, you're not just acknowledging what they've done, you're acknowledging who they are. I once worked with a school principal who transformed her struggling school with this principle. Instead of generic praise, she started noting specific actions that contributed to the school's success. She would tell a teacher, "I noticed how you stayed late yesterday to help Sarah understand that difficult math concept. Your dedication to your students makes our school better." This wasn't flattery. It was recognition of real value. The results were remarkable. Teacher morale improved, student performance increased, and the school's culture shifted from resignation to inspiration. Why? Because people who feel genuinely appreciated naturally strive to be worthy of that appreciation. But here's the key. Appreciation must be specific, sincere, and earned. Generalized praise is like counterfeit money. It might look good at first glance, but it has no real value. Let me give you 3 principles for mastering the art of genuine appreciation. First, be specific. Don't just say "good job." Explain exactly what was good and why it mattered. Instead of "you're a great team player," say, "the way you stayed calm and helped resolve that crisis yesterday showed real leadership. It made a difference for the whole team." Second, focus on effort and choices rather than natural abilities. Appreciating someone for their height or intelligence isn't meaningful. They were born with these traits. But appreciating their persistence, their creativity, their kindness, these are choices they make. And acknowledging them reinforces positive behavior. Third, make it timely. Appreciation is like fresh fruit, best served fresh. When you notice something worthy of appreciation, express it right away. Don't wait for the annual review or the perfect moment. I remember a sales executive who transformed his team's performance with this approach. Instead of focusing solely on results, he started appreciating the effort and creativity his team showed in pursuing opportunities. He would send personal notes mentioning specific actions he'd observed. The way you handled that difficult client conversation yesterday showed real professionalism. Your patience and clarity under pressure were impressive. His team's performance skyrocketed. Why? Because they knew their efforts were truly seen and valued, not just their results. Here's something powerful to remember. Appreciation is not a zero-sum game. Recognizing excellence in others doesn't diminish your own worth, it enhances it. When you become known as someone who genuinely appreciates others, your influence naturally grows. But here's the warning. Never use appreciation as a manipulation tool. People can sense when you're giving praise to get something in return. True. Appreciation is given freely without expectation of return. Try this experiment. For the next week, make it your mission to catch people doing things right. Look for specific actions worthy of appreciation. When you find them, and you will find them if you look, express your appreciation immediately and specifically. Remember, the deepest craving of human nature is the need to be appreciated. Not praised, not flattered, but truly appreciated for our real worth. When you master the art of genuine appreciation, you hold the key to motivation, loyalty, and lasting influence. So let me challenge you. Today, find 3 opportunities for genuine appreciation. Not general praise, but specific recognition of real value. Watch how this simple act transforms your relationships and strengthens your connections. Let me share a truth that took me years to understand. You can win an argument and still lose everything that matters. The temporary satisfaction of proving someone wrong pales in comparison to the lasting power of winning them over. I once witnessed a brilliant attorney lose a major client, not because he was wrong, but because he was right too forcefully. He won every point in their discussion, systematically dismantling his client's position with perfect logic. And in doing so, he lost something far more valuable than the argument. He lost trust, respect, and ultimately, the relationship. Here's what most people don't understand about influence. It's not about defeating others in verbal combat. It's about guiding them to a shared understanding. The moment an interaction becomes an argument, you've already lost the opportunity to influence. Let me teach you what I taught that attorney when he came to me for advice. There are 3 principles to mastering influence. First, understand that people are not creatures of logic. They're creatures of emotion who use logic to justify their feelings. When you argue with someone, you're not just challenging their ideas. You're challenging their identity, their self-image, their entire worldview. I remember a CEO who was trying to implement a major change in his organization. His initial approach was to present compelling data and logical arguments. The result? Fierce resistance at every level. When he shifted his approach from arguing to influencing, listening to concerns, acknowledging fears, and involving people. In the solution, the same change was embraced enthusiastically. Second, master the art of the graceful retreat. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, you know what? You might be right about that. This isn't weakness, it's strategic wisdom. When you give people room to save face, you create space for real dialogue. There was a sales manager I worked with who transformed her team's performance with this principle. Instead of arguing with resistant team members about new methods, she would say, "You've been successful with your approach for years. What if we experiment with this new method alongside what's already working for you? The resistance melted away. Third, learn to guide conversations towards solutions rather than victories. Ask questions that lead to discovery. What would make this work for you? How could we address your concerns? What if we looked at it from this angle? These questions transform confrontations into collaborations. Here's a powerful technique I've taught to thousands. When you feel an argument brewing, pause and ask yourself, what do I really want from this interaction? Usually, it's not to prove you're right. It's to achieve a specific outcome. Keep that outcome in focus and let it guide your approach. I once observed a master negotiator handle a potentially explosive situation. Instead of arguing with an angry client about contract terms, he said, "Help me understand what would make this work for you." That simple shift from argument to exploration led to a solution that satisfied everyone. But here's the crucial part. This isn't about avoiding conflict or suppressing disagreement. It's about handling differences in a way that builds relationships rather than destroying them. Try this experiment. The next time you find yourself in a disagreement, make it your goal not to prove your point, but to understand the other person's perspective fully. Ask questions. Show genuine interest in their viewpoint. Watch how this changes the dynamic of the interaction. Remember, influence is about pulling, not pushing. When you argue, you push people away from your position. When you influence, you draw them toward understanding. Here's another powerful insight. Silence is often more persuasive than words. When someone makes a statement you disagree with, try responding with thoughtful questions rather than counterarguments. That's interesting. What led you to that conclusion? This approach invites reflection rather than resistance. Let me share. A technique that has saved countless relationships, the yes-and approach. Instead of meeting opposition with opposition, build on what the other person is saying. Yes, I see your point about costs, and that's exactly why this investment will save us money in the long run. The mark of true influence isn't how many arguments you win, it's how many unnecessary arguments you avoid while still achieving your objectives. Every time you feel the urge to argue, ask yourself, is winning this point worth damaging this relationship? So here's your challenge. For the next week, ban the word "but" from your vocabulary when dealing with disagreements. Replace it with, and watch how this simple shift transforms potential arguments into productive discussions. Remember, the goal isn't to win debates, it's to win allies. Master this principle, and you'll find yourself achieving more while arguing less. There is a kind of magic in these three simple words. I was wrong. When spoken sincerely, they have more power to build trust and respect than 1,000 clever explanations or defensive arguments. Yet for many, these words feel like admission of weakness. Let me tell you why. Nothing could be further from the truth. I once knew a senior executive who transformed his entire leadership reputation with one courageous moment. During a company-wide meeting, he stood up and said, "I made a mistake with our last strategic initiative. I didn't listen to the concerns many of you raised, and it cost us time and resources. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." The room fell silent. Then something remarkable happened. People who had been resistant to his leadership began offering suggestions, sharing concerns openly, engaging more actively. Why? Because his willingness to admit his mistake didn't diminish his authority. It enhanced it. Here's what most people don't understand about admitting mistakes. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a demonstration of strength. It shows that you're secure enough in your competence to acknowledge your imperfections. Let me share 3 principles that will help you master the art of admitting when you're wrong. First, do it quickly. The longer you wait to admit a mistake, the more damage it does, both to your relationships and to your credibility. I remember a manager who waited months to admit he'd made a poor hiring decision. By the time he acknowledged his mistake, the team's morale had suffered significantly. When I asked him why he waited so long, he said, "I hoped things would improve on their own. They rarely do." Second, be specific about what you got wrong and why. Don't just say, "I made a mistake." Explain what the mistake was and what you learned from it. This transforms an admission of error into a demonstration of growth. There was a teacher I worked with who masterfully handled a mistake in grading. Instead of quietly correcting the grades, she addressed her class directly. "I made an error in how I interpreted your projects. I was focusing too much on technical precision and not enough on creative thinking, which was the real goal of this assignment. I've revised the grades to reflect this, and I've learned something important about balanced evaluation." Third, focus on solutions, not excuses. After admitting your mistake, immediately pivot to how you plan to fix it or what you've learned to prevent it from happening again. This shows that your admission isn't just about feeling guilty, it's about getting better. I once observed a young entrepreneur handle a product launch failure beautifully. Instead of defending the decision or blaming market conditions, he told his investors, "I rushed the launch before we had proper market validation. That was my mistake. Here's what we're doing to correct course, and here's how we'll approach future launches differently." But here's something crucial to understand. Admitting when you're wrong isn't just about big mistakes. It's about creating a culture of honesty and continuous improvement in all your relationships. Try this experiment. For the next week, practice admitting small mistakes immediately when you notice them. "You're right, I did interrupt you just now. I realize I forgot to copy you on that email. You know what? I could have handled that situation better." Watch how this practice changes how people respond to you. When you're quick to admit small mistakes, people trust you more when you stand firm on important issues. Remember, your credibility isn't built on being perfect, it's built on being honest. Every time you admit a mistake, you're not showing weakness, you're showing integrity. Here's another powerful insight. When you admit your mistakes readily, you create an environment where others feel safe doing the same. This leads to better communication, faster problem solving, and stronger relationships. I remember a team leader who transformed her department's culture by modeling this behavior. Whenever something went wrong, she would first ask herself, "What part of this was my responsibility?" and openly acknowledge it. Soon, her team members began doing the same. Blame games disappeared, replaced by collaborative problem solving. Let me share a technique that makes admitting mistakes easier. Frame them as learning opportunities. Instead of saying, "I failed," say, "I learned." Instead of "I was wrong about everything," say, "I now understand a better approach." The most successful people I've known aren't those who make the fewest mistakes. They're the ones who admit their mistakes most readily and learn from them most thoroughly. So here's your challenge. The next time you realize you're wrong about something, don't defend, don't explain, don't justify. Simply say, "I was wrong," and focus on moving forward constructively. Watch how this simple act of courage transforms your relationships and enhances your influence. Remember, admitting when you're wrong isn't about putting yourself down. It's about lifting the level of trust in all your relationships. No one likes to feel that they're being told what to do. Even the best ideas can face resistance when they're presented as commands rather than discoveries. But when people feel that an idea is their own, they'll move mountains to make it succeed. Let me share a story that perfectly illustrates this principle. There was a brilliant factory manager who couldn't understand why his efficiency improvements were meeting such fierce resistance from his workers. His ideas were sound, his calculations perfect, but he was missing something crucial: ownership. When he came to me for advice, I suggested a different approach. Instead of presenting his solutions, he should present the problems and invite his workers to help solve them. The transformation was remarkable. The same workers who had resisted his changes now enthusiastically proposed similar improvements, sometimes even better ones, because they felt ownership of the solutions. Here's what most people don't understand about influence. The best ideas are the ones that people discover for themselves. Your role isn't to force-feed solutions, It's to create the conditions for discovery. Let me teach you 3 principles for mastering this art. First, learn to plant seeds instead of full-grown trees. Rather than presenting a complete solution, share observations that lead others to similar conclusions. I once watched a CEO masterfully handle a necessary reorganization. Instead of announcing changes, she began sharing market data and asking her team, "What do you make of these trends? How might we need to evolve?" Within weeks, her team was proposing the very changes she had envisioned. Second, master the art of the suggestive question. Questions like, "What if we?" or "Have you ever considered?" Invite people to explore ideas without feeling pressured. They create a collaborative atmosphere where ideas can grow naturally. There was a sales director I worked with who transformed his team's performance using this approach. Instead of mandating new sales techniques, he would ask, "What do you think makes some clients more responsive than others?" The team's own answers often aligned with the very methods he wanted to implement. Third, be willing to let others modify your ideas. When people can shape and adjust a concept, they develop a sense of ownership. This often leads to better solutions than your original concept, because it incorporates diverse perspectives and experiences. I remember a product manager who was struggling to get buy-in for a new feature. Her breakthrough came when she stopped presenting it as a finished concept and instead shared the core problem she was trying to solve. The team not only embraced the project, but improved upon her initial design significantly. Here's a powerful technique I've taught to thousands. Before presenting any solution, start with questions that help others identify the problem. When people recognize the problem themselves, they're more invested in finding a solution. Try this experiment. In your next meeting, instead of making statements, ask questions that lead people toward your desired outcome. Instead of saying, "We need to improve our customer service," ask, "How do you think our customers feel about their experience with us?" But here's the crucial part. You must be genuine in this approach. This isn't about manipulation. It's about facilitation. Your goal isn't to trick people into thinking your ideas are theirs. It's to create an environment where good ideas can emerge and be embraced by everyone. Remember, the human mind is more receptive to ideas it discovers than to ideas it's told. When people feel they've arrived at a conclusion themselves, that conclusion becomes part of their identity. Here's another powerful insight. Timing is crucial. Sometimes you need to plant ideas early and let them germinate. I knew a change management consultant who would casually mention concepts months before they needed to be implemented. By the time formal discussions began, people were already familiar with and often supportive of the ideas. Let me share a technique that's particularly effective, the power of what-if scenarios. Instead of saying we should do X, try, "What if we were to explore something like X?" This small shift in language creates space for others to engage with and shape the idea. The most successful leaders I've known aren't those who force their vision on others. They're the ones who help others see possibilities and own the path forward. So here's your challenge. In your next important discussion, resist the urge to present your complete solution. Instead, share the challenge and invite others to help solve it. Watch how this approach not only leads to better solutions, but also to stronger buy-in and more enthusiastic implementation. Remember, true influence isn't about imposing your will. It's about creating the conditions for shared success. There's a fundamental truth about human nature that the greatest leaders understand. No one likes to take orders. Even when we know we must follow directions, something in our spirit resists being commanded. But there's an art to getting things done without giving orders. It's the art of asking questions. I once knew a factory supervisor who was frustrated with his team's performance. His solution? Barking more orders, giving more detailed instructions. The result? Increasing resistance, declining morale, and stagnant productivity. When he came to me for advice, I taught him something that transformed his leadership. the power of the question. Instead of telling a worker, "Clean up this area," he learned to ask, "How do you think we could make this workspace more efficient?" Instead of ordering, "Follow the safety procedures," he began asking, "What could happen if we overlook these safety measures?" The transformation was remarkable. The same workers who had grudgingly followed orders now took initiative, showed creativity, and even exceeded expectations. Why? Because questions engage the mind while orders engage only the hands. Here's what most people don't understand about leadership. Telling people what to do creates followers, but asking the right questions creates leaders. When you ask instead of tell, you accomplish two things simultaneously. You get the task done, and you develop the person doing it. Let me share 3 principles for mastering this approach. First, learn to frame questions that guide discovery. Instead of saying, "File these reports alphabetically," ask, "What would be the most logical way to organize these files for quick reference?" This engages critical thinking and often leads to better solutions than you might have prescribed. I remember a school principal who transformed her teacher's approach to classroom management. Instead of mandating specific discipline policies, she would ask, "What kind of environment would best support learning in your classroom?" The teachers developed more effective and personalized approaches because they were engaged in solving the problem, not just following rules. Second, use questions to promote ownership and accountability. When someone comes to you with a problem, resist the urge to provide immediate solutions. Instead ask, "What approaches have you considered?" Or, "How do you think we should handle this?" There was a marketing director I worked with who mastered this technique. When her team members brought her challenges, she would ask, "If you were in my position, what would you do?" The quality of solutions her team developed far exceeded what she might have prescribed, and they took greater pride in implementing them. Third, learn to use questions to guide rather than interrogate. The tone and intention behind your questions matter enormously. Questions should invite thinking, not induce stress. "What are your thoughts on this?" is very different from "Why haven't you figured this out yet?" But here's the crucial part. This approach requires patience. It's often faster in the short term to simply give orders. But the long-term benefits of developing independent thinkers far outweigh the temporary efficiency of command and control. Try this experiment. For one day, transform every order you might give into a question that leads to the same outcome. Instead of "Get this to me by Friday," ask, "What timeline do you think would ensure we meet our deadline?" Watch how this changes the quality of engagement and results. Remember, questions aren't just about getting information. They're about sparking thought and inspiring action. The right question can be more motivating than the most forceful command. Here's another powerful insight. Questions help people save face when corrections are needed. Instead of pointing out a mistake directly, ask, "How could we prevent this issue in the future?" This approach maintains dignity while promoting improvement. Let me share a technique that's particularly effective: the cascade of questions. Start broad and narrow down. What's our goal here? What obstacles might we face? How could we address each of those? What support would you need? This process guides thinking while maintaining autonomy. The most effective leaders I've known aren't those who give the best orders, they're the ones who ask the best questions. They understand that their role isn't to be the source of all answers, but to be the catalyst for discovery. So, here's your challenge. For the next week, before giving any direct order, pause and formulate a question that would lead to the same outcome. Notice how this changes not only the results you get, but also the relationships you build. Remember, when you tell someone something, you create resistance. When you ask the right questions, you create partners. There's a profound truth about human nature that the wisest leaders understand. Everyone wants to be better than they are. Deep within each person lies an aspiration to rise above their current self, to live up to noble ideals. When you appeal to these higher motives, you tap into one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. I once witnessed a remarkable transformation in a troubled urban school. The new principal didn't start by focusing on test scores or discipline problems. Instead, she gathered her teachers and asked them to reflect on why they chose education as their calling. She spoke about their power to shape futures, to lift children out of poverty, to create tomorrow's leaders. The change was extraordinary. The same teachers who had been counting days until retirement began staying late to help struggling students. Why? Because she hadn't just given them tasks. She had reminded them of their noble purpose. Here's what most people don't understand about motivation. People will work harder for a cause than for a quota. They'll give more for meaning than for money. When you appeal to people's noble aspirations, you transform compliance into commitment. Let me share 3 principles for mastering this approach. First, learn to see the highest potential in every person. Everyone has a noble side, even if it's buried under layers of cynicism or disappointment. Your job is to speak to that better self, to remind people of their own capacity for excellence. I remember a company president who turned around a failing division not by threatening jobs or promising bonuses, but by appealing to his team's pride in craftsmanship. "We have the ability to create products that make people's lives better," he would say. "That's a privilege, and it comes with a responsibility." Production quality soared because people weren't just doing their jobs. They were living up to their own standards of excellence. Second, frame challenges in terms of higher purposes. Instead of talking about targets and deadlines, speak about impact and legacy. A hospital administrator I worked with transformed her staff's approach to procedural changes not by emphasizing compliance, but by focusing on patient dignity and family peace of mind. Third, consistently acknowledge noble actions and intentions. When you see someone living up to higher principles, point it out. Not as flattery, but as recognition of their better nature in action. But here's the crucial part. This isn't about manipulation or empty rhetoric. You must genuinely believe in people's capacity for nobility, and your appeals must be authentic. People can sense when you're simply using elevated language to disguise base motives. Try this experiment. Before your next important interaction, ask yourself, what is the noblest motivation this person could have for doing what I'm asking? Then speak to that motivation. Remember, everyone wants to feel part of something larger than themselves. When you connect daily tasks to meaningful purposes, you transform routine work into meaningful contribution. Here's another powerful insight. Noble motives often lie dormant, waiting to be awakened. I once saw a team of customer service representatives transform their performance when their manager helped them see their role not as handling complaints, but as restoring faith in human decency, one interaction at a time. Let me share a technique that's particularly effective: the power of noble traditions. Help people connect their current actions to honorable historical precedents. A craftsman works differently when reminded that he's carrying forward centuries of artistic tradition. A teacher teaches differently when connected to the legacy of educators who have transformed lives. The most influential leaders I've known don't just manage tasks. They nurture noble aspirations. They understand that everyone hungers to live up to their highest self. Consider this: every person you interact with today has dreams they may have forgotten, ideals they may have compromised, aspirations they may have set aside. Your words can help reawaken these noble aims. Here's a powerful example. I knew a sales manager who transformed his team's approach by shifting their focus from closing deals to helping families make wise financial decisions that will benefit their children's future. Same tasks, different meaning, and dramatically different results. So here's your challenge. For the next week, in every significant interaction, find ways to appeal to noble motives. Connect daily tasks to higher purposes. Watch how this elevates not just performance, but also the entire quality of your relationships. Remember, when you appeal to noble motives, you don't just get better results. You help people become better versions of themselves, Want to know one of the most disarming things you can do in any relationship? Talk about your own mistakes first, not as a strategy of manipulation, but as an authentic demonstration of humility and self-awareness. This simple act has more power to build trust than 1,000 perfect performances. I remember watching a new executive step into a struggling division. In his first meeting, instead of listing his accomplishments or outlining his grand vision, he did something unexpected. He shared 3 significant mistakes he'd made in his career and what he'd learned from each. The tension in the room visibly dissolved. Why? Because he'd shown himself to be human, learnable, and honest. Here's what most people don't understand about leadership and influence. Perfection doesn't build connection. Vulnerability does. When you're willing to discuss your own mistakes, you create a safe space for others to acknowledge theirs. Let me share 3 principles for mastering this approach. First, learn to share mistakes with purpose. This isn't about confession for confession's sake. It's about creating context for growth and learning. When you share a mistake, always include what you learned and how it made you better. I once knew a sales trainer who transformed his effectiveness with this principle. Instead of presenting himself as an infallible expert, he would begin each session by sharing a major error he'd made early in his career. "I lost a 6-figure deal because I talked too much and listened too little," he would say. "That taught me the power of active listening." His trainees were far more receptive to his teaching because he'd established himself as someone who had learned from experience, not just theory. Second, use your mistakes to build bridges. When someone is struggling with a challenge, share a similar difficulty you've faced. This isn't about one-upmanship and failure. It's about showing understanding through shared experience. There was a mentor I worked with who had an extraordinary ability to develop young professionals. Her secret? She would readily share stories of her early career missteps. "When I see you struggling with public speaking," she would say, "I remember my own first presentation where I completely froze. Here's how I worked through that." Third, make it about growth, not guilt. The goal of sharing mistakes isn't to beat yourself up. It's to demonstrate that errors are stepping stones to improvement. This creates an environment where mistakes are seen as opportunities rather than failures. But here's the crucial part. Timing matters. Share your mistakes at the beginning of interactions where you might need to address others' errors. This sets the tone for honest dialogue rather than defensive responses. Try this experiment. The next time you need to give feedback, start by sharing a relevant mistake you've made in a similar situation. Watch how this changes the receptivity of your audience. Remember, when you lead with your own mistakes, you demonstrate that it's safe for others to be imperfect. This creates an environment of trust and continuous improvement. Here's another powerful insight. Sharing mistakes actually enhances your credibility. It shows that your expertise comes from real experience, including failures, not just theoretical knowledge. Let me share a technique that's particularly effective: the lesson learned framework. When sharing a mistake, structure it this way. Here's what I did. Here's what went wrong. Here's what I learned, and here's how it made me better. This transforms a potentially negative story into a growth narrative. The most respected leaders I've known aren't those who never make mistakes. They're the ones who own their mistakes and share the lessons openly. They understand that their vulnerability becomes permission for others to be honestly imperfect. Consider this: every mistake you've made is an opportunity to connect with someone facing similar challenges. Your past failures, openly shared, can become bridges to understanding and growth for others. Here's a powerful example. I knew a CEO who transformed his company's culture by instituting what he called Failure Friday. Each week he would share a mistake he'd made and what he'd learned from it. Soon his entire leadership team began doing the same. The result? Innovation increased because people felt safe taking smart risks. So here's your challenge. In your next important interaction, find an appropriate way to share a relevant mistake you've made, not as self-deprecation, but as a bridge to understanding and growth. Watch how this changes the dynamic of the conversation. Remember, when you share your mistakes first, you don't lose respect. You gain trust, and trust is the foundation of all meaningful influence. Think of every relationship as having an emotional bank account. Every interaction is either a deposit or a withdrawal. The most successful people in life understand this principle and make consistent deposits long before they ever need to make a withdrawal. Once knew a sales executive who never had trouble getting meetings with busy CEOs. His secret? He spent years making deposits in relationships without asking for anything in return. He would send relevant articles, make helpful introductions, share valuable insights, all with no immediate agenda. When he finally needed to make a withdrawal, his emotional bank accounts were overflowing. Here's what most people don't understand about relationship building. It's not about what you can get, it's about what you consistently give. Every positive interaction, every thoughtful gesture, every moment of genuine support is a deposit in your emotional bank account with that person. Let me share 3 principles for mastering this approach. First, understand that small deposits, made consistently, add up to real wealth in relationships. A timely text message, remembering someone's important day, sharing a relevant resource. These seemingly small actions accumulate into strong bonds of trust and goodwill. I remember a manager who transformed her team's performance through this principle. Every morning she would make one small deposit with each team member. A sincere compliment here, a word of encouragement there, a moment of genuine interest in someone's project. Within months, her team's productivity and morale soared. Why? Because people will move mountains for someone who consistently invests in them. Second, learn to make deposits that matter to the other person. Just as different people prefer different love languages, they value different types of emotional deposits. Some appreciate public recognition, others value private encouragement. Some treasure your time, others your insights. There was a mentor I knew who mastered this art. Before making any deposit, he would ask himself, what would be truly meaningful to this person? His gestures weren't always grand, but they were always relevant to the recipient. Third, maintain a positive balance in your emotional bank accounts. Don't wait until you need something to start making deposits. By then, it's too late. The time to build relationship capital is before you need it. But here's the crucial part. Your deposits must be genuine. People can sense when you're networking versus when you're genuinely investing in the relationship. The first depletes trust. The second builds it. Try this experiment. Make a list of your 10 most important professional relationships. Next to each name, write down the last 3 deposits you made in that relationship. If you're struggling to identify recent deposits, you know where to focus. Remember, in relationships, as in banking, you can't withdraw what you haven't deposited. Every time you need to make a request, you're making a withdrawal. Make sure you have sufficient balance to cover it. Here's another powerful insight. Different types of deposits carry different weights. A moment of support during someone's crisis makes a larger deposit than dozens of casual interactions. Looking for these high-value deposit opportunities isn't opportunistic. It's wise relationship stewardship. Let me share a technique that's particularly effective, the principle of unexpected deposits. When you support someone at an unexpected moment or in an unexpected way, the impact is multiplied. I knew a business leader who would send handwritten notes to his employees' families, thanking them for supporting their loved ones' dedication to the company. These unexpected deposits created deep loyalty. The most influential people I've known aren't those who make the biggest withdrawals. They're the ones who make the most consistent deposits. They understand that relationship capital, like financial capital, grows through regular investment. Consider this. Every person you interact with today is an opportunity to make a deposit, a genuine compliment, a moment of full attention, a helpful suggestion. These are all deposits in your emotional bank accounts. Here's a powerful example. I watched a new team leader transform a toxic workplace culture through systematic deposit making. She started each day by asking herself, how can I invest in my team today? Sometimes it was bringing coffee for someone working early. Other times it was publicly crediting someone's contribution. Over time, these deposits transformed suspicion into trust. So here's your challenge. For the next week, focus on making at least 3 meaningful deposits each day in your key relationships. Not because you want something, but because you're building relationship capital for the future. Remember, in the bank of relationships, deposits must exceed withdrawals. Make that your guiding principle and watch how your influence grows naturally and sustainably. There's a simple yet profound measure of your impact on the world. Do people leave interactions with you better than they arrived? This isn't just about being nice. It's about being transformative. Every interaction is an opportunity to elevate someone's day, thinking, or life. I once knew a receptionist who transformed her entire company's culture from this simple principle. Everyone who passed her desk left feeling more valued, more capable, more optimistic. She didn't have an impressive title or corner office, but her influence was extraordinary because she understood this fundamental truth. We all have the power to elevate others. Here's what most people don't understand about influence. It's not about position or power, it's about impact. The question isn't, what authority do I have, but rather, how can I leave this person better than I found them? Let me share 3 principles for mastering this approach. First, understand that elevation can happen in any interaction, no matter how brief. A genuine smile, a word of encouragement, a moment of full attention. These small acts can shift someone's entire trajectory. I remember a CEO who told me his career changed because a senior executive once stopped in the hallway, looked him in the eye, and said, "I see real potential in you." That 30-second interaction gave him the confidence to pursue opportunities he might have otherwise ignored. Second, make elevation intentional, not accidental. Before every interaction, ask yourself, how can I add value to this person? Sometimes it's through sharing knowledge, sometimes through listening, sometimes through connecting them with resources or opportunities. There was a manager I worked with who transformed her team meetings with this principle. Before each meeting, she would ask herself, how can everyone leave this room better than they entered it? Sometimes that meant highlighting someone's achievement. Other times it meant teaching a new skill or helping the team see their work's larger purpose. Third, understand that elevation isn't just about making people feel good. It's about helping them become better. This might mean offering constructive feedback, challenging assumptions, or pushing people out of their comfort zones. But when done with genuine care for their growth, even challenging interactions can be elevating. But here's the crucial part: this approach must be genuine. People can sense when you're trying to manipulate them versus when you're genuinely invested in their growth and well-being. Try this experiment. For one day, make it your mission to leave every person you interact with slightly better than you found them. It might be through encouragement, information, opportunity, or simply full presence. Watch how this intention transforms your interactions. Remember, every interaction is an opportunity for elevation. The question is not whether you will have an impact, it's what kind of impact you will choose to have. Here's another powerful insight. Elevation creates a ripple effect. When you leave someone better than you found them, they're more likely to do the same for others. I once watched a simple act of kindness from a supervisor cascade through an entire department, transforming the culture one interaction at a time. Let me share a technique that's particularly effective, the one better thing approach. In every interaction, find one specific way to add value to the other person's life or work. Maybe it's a book recommendation that could help with their current challenge. Maybe it's an introduction to someone who could advance their goals. Maybe it's simply a new perspective on a problem they're facing. The most influential people I've known aren't those who take the most from others. They're the ones who add the most value to others. They understand that true influence comes from elevation, not exploitation. Consider this. Every person you meet today is fighting some battle you know nothing about. Your interaction with them could be the very thing that helps them win that battle. This isn't about pressure, it's about possibility. Here's a powerful example. I knew a teacher who transformed her approach to difficult students. Instead of asking, "How can I control the student's behavior?" she began asking, "How can I leave this student better than I found them today?" The shift in her question led to a shift in her impact. So here's your challenge. For the next week, end each day by asking yourself, did I leave people better than I found them today? Be specific. How did you add value? How did you elevate others? Use these reflections to become more intentional in your interactions. Remember, your true legacy isn't what you achieve, it's how you leave people. Make elevation your mission, and watch how your influence grows naturally and meaningfully. Let me share a truth that the most successful people understand. Friendship isn't just a pleasant addition to life, it's the foundation of all meaningful achievement. The ability to build and maintain genuine friendships is perhaps the most valuable skill you can develop in both your personal and professional life. I once knew a businessman who seemed to accomplish the impossible with remarkable regularity. His secret wasn't superior intelligence or extraordinary talent. It was his ability to build genuine friendships wherever he went. He understood that success isn't about what you know or even who you know. It's about who is genuinely glad to know you. Here's what most people don't understand about strategic friendship. It's not about networking in the traditional sense. It's not about collecting business cards or LinkedIn connections. It's about creating genuine bonds that enrich both parties' lives. Let me share 3 principles for mastering this approach. First, understand that strategic friendship isn't manipulative. It's intentional. The word strategic doesn't mean insincere, it means purposeful. Just as you're strategic about your education or career development, be strategic about building meaningful relationships. I remember a young entrepreneur who transformed her struggling startup through this principle. Instead of focusing solely on pitching investors, she focused on building genuine friendships within her industry. She would reach out to people not to ask for anything, but to learn their stories, understand their challenges, share their successes. When she finally needed investment, she didn't have to cold call. She had a community of people who believed in her. Second, recognize that friendship is a skill that can be developed. Just like any other skill, it requires practice, attention, and continuous improvement. The best friendships aren't accidents. They're the result of consistent, thoughtful effort. There was a sales director I worked with who doubled his team's performance not by teaching better closing techniques, but by teaching them how to build genuine friendships with clients. When someone trusts you as a friend, he would say, they'll tell you the real problems they need solved. Third, understand that professional friendship isn't different from personal friendship. It's just friendship in a professional context. The same principles that make you a good friend in your personal life, reliability, sincerity, genuine interest in others, make you valuable in your professional life. But here's the crucial part. You must be genuine. People can sense when you're trying to network versus when you're genuinely interested in building a relationship. The first creates contacts, the second creates allies. Try this experiment. Instead of thinking about what you can get from professional relationships, focus on how you can enrich the lives of the people you meet. Watch how this shift in mindset transforms your interactions and, ultimately, your opportunities. Remember, every significant opportunity in life comes through people. The wider and deeper your friendship network, the more possibilities become available to you. Here is another powerful insight. Friendship compounds like interest. Small investments in relationships, made consistently over time, yield exponential returns. I once watched a mid-level manager rise to CEO, largely because she had spent years building genuine friendships across all levels of her organization. Let me share a technique that's particularly effective, the friendship first principle. Before thinking about what someone can do for you professionally, focus on finding genuine common ground. What interests do you share? What challenges have you both faced? What values do you hold in common? The most successful people I've known aren't those with the most impressive resumes. They're the ones who've mastered the art of turning acquaintances into friends and friends into allies. Consider this: every person you meet professionally is first and foremost a human being with hopes, fears, dreams, and challenges just like yours. When you connect on this human level, the professional relationship naturally strengthens. Here's a powerful example. I knew a consultant who transformed her practice by shifting from a traditional business development model to what she called friendship-based growth. Instead of focusing on closing deals, she focused on building genuine relationships. Her business grew slower at first, but became much more stable and satisfying. So here's your challenge. For the next month, approach every professional interaction with the mindset of building a friendship rather than making a connection. Ask questions that go beyond business, share experiences that reveal your human side, show genuine interest in others' lives beyond their professional roles. Remember, strategic friendship isn't about using people, it's about creating genuine value in others' lives while enriching your own. When you master this art, success becomes not just easier, but more meaningful. There's something remarkable about truly magnetic personalities. They don't push, they pull. They don't demand attention, they attract it. And here's the beautiful truth. This magnetism isn't something you're born with, it's something you can develop. I once knew a woman who could walk into any room and, within minutes, have everyone gravitating toward her. She wasn't the most beautiful, the most accomplished, or the most outgoing, but she had mastered something more powerful: the art of making others feel seen, heard, and valued. Here's what most people don't understand about personal magnetism. It's not about being the most charismatic or entertaining person in the room. It's about creating an environment where others feel more charismatic and entertaining in your presence. Let me share 3 principles for developing this magnetic presence. First, understand that true magnetism comes from genuine interest in others. The most magnetic people I've known aren't those who tell the best stories. They're the ones who elicit the best stories from others. They've mastered the art of making others feel interesting. I remember working with a CEO who transformed his company's culture through this principle. Instead of trying to be the most impressive person in the room, he focused on being the most interested. In every meeting, he would ask questions that helped others showcase their expertise and insight. Soon, people weren't just attending his meetings, they were looking forward to them. Second, develop what I call presence with purpose. This means being fully present in every interaction, but with the conscious intention of adding value. It's not enough to just be there. You must be there with the goal of making the interaction meaningful for others. There was a sales professional I knew who doubled her results not by learning better closing techniques, but by mastering this kind of presence. She would often say, before every meeting, I ask myself, how can I make this person feel better about themselves than they did before they met me? Third, cultivate what I call authentic resonance. This means aligning your words, actions, and energy in a way that others can feel and trust. It's about being consistently genuine across all situations and with all people. But here's the crucial part. You can't fake magnetism. The moment you try to be magnetic is the moment you lose authentic appeal. Instead, focus on genuinely appreciating and uplifting others. Try this experiment. For 1 week, make it your mission to discover something genuinely interesting about every person you meet. Not to flatter them, but to truly understand what makes them unique and valuable. Remember, people are naturally drawn to those who make them feel good about themselves, not through flattery or manipulation, but through genuine appreciation and interest. Here's another powerful insight. Magnetic personalities create safe spaces for others to be themselves. They don't judge, they don't compete, they don't diminish. They create an environment where others feel free to share their thoughts, dreams, and concerns. Let me share a technique that's particularly effective, the elevation principle. In every interaction, find ways to elevate the conversation beyond the superficial. If someone mentions their job, ask about their career dreams. If they mention a hobby, ask what draws them to it. The most magnetic people I've known aren't those who dominate conversations. They're the ones who elevate them. They take discussions from the mundane to the meaningful, from the superficial to the significant. Consider this. Every person you meet today has depths you haven't explored, stories you haven't heard, insights you haven't considered. Your magnetism grows when you become genuinely interested in discovering these hidden dimensions. Here's a powerful example. I once watched a newly promoted manager transform a toxic team culture through magnetic leadership. Instead of trying to assert authority, she focused on creating an environment where every team member felt valued and heard. Within months, the same team that had resisted previous managers was voluntarily putting in extra effort. So, here's your final challenge. For the next month, focus on developing these magnetic qualities. Not to manipulate or impress, but to create genuine value in every interaction. Be fully present. Show authentic interest. Create safe spaces for others to shine. Remember, true magnetism isn't about attracting attention to yourself. It's about creating an environment where others naturally want to be around you because they feel better about themselves in your presence. As we conclude this journey together, understand that these principles aren't just techniques, they're a way of being. When you genuinely care about others, when you consistently add value to their lives, when you create spaces where they can be their best selves, you don't have to try to be magnetic. You already are.